Dalton told me to go, so I'll just go. It is TexAgs Rewind presented by T-Mobile, and I'm going to ask you guys a real serious question. What is the best sports feud of all time? Tell us some of the best sports feud. Comment below. Tell us all about it, because this was a conversation piece because of the whole Jimbo versus Saban thing. That might be the best one ever, but I know there's some other ones. Some of our favorites, the Kerrigan, Tanya Harding one. That was a good sports feud. Kobe versus Shaq. So comment below on some of the best ones of all time. As I mentioned, this is brought to you by T-Mobile. They want you to visit T-Mobile.com/acrossamerica to learn how you can get more value and more coverage through T-Mobile. So on the show, we did that during the Go Hour, the best feuds out there. We had J.B. Moss on the show talking a little bit about what's going on in Hoover. Bronny's there in Hoover, and he's telling us what's at stake for Texas A&M. And then we did Recruiting Country. Jason Howell, he was in for Bronny, who was in Hoover. Howell gave us his spin on everything going on, especially with a lot of the guys up there in the Metroplex area. We have that. It is TexAgs Rewind. Watch now, please.
I don't want to say Magic and Bird. That was just a great rivalry.
Great rivalry, not a feud.
Right. There's a difference.
Yeah, there is a difference.
Now, maybe there was a feud between Isaiah Thomas and Michael Jordan.
Absolutely. Kept him out of the Dream Team.
Right. So,
that's a great one. That is a great one.
Just the bad boys in the Celtics.
So I think the NBA lends itself to more one-on-one kind of like football. It's team versus team, but I think individual personalities in basketball become bigger feuds, because you can say Michael versus Isaiah. You can absolutely say the Bulls versus the Pistons as a feud. Yes, a rivalry, but for a short time, that was a feud.
And Keith Lane just texted in the whole Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan.
Absolutely.
Going back to the Olympics, I tell you one was, I think it qualifies, Carl Lewis and Ben Johnson. Carl Lewis actually suggested that Ben Johnson was doing steroids, and then turned out he was.
Oh, really? Sounds familiar, huh? The real, top of the sport guy mentions something about another guy, and do a little digging.
But in this case, he was right.
Yeah, he was right.
So, to me, the difficulty is separating rivalry and feud.
Yeah, and I think since it's a radio show, we can do whatever we want. We can do both. But I was thinking more kind of one-on-one. I'll give you a couple names that I have for you. Kobe, Shaq.
Okay.
They had a feud on the same team.
Yeah.
They spoke through the media and had a feud, right? And that was a time where Kobe was not beloved the way he is now. And Shaq, I think, was beloved at the time. You could also go a step further and say Phil Jackson, Kobe. Phil had a book about how tough it was to deal with Kobe. That was a feud in itself, although it all worked itself out later. One from your day, Billy Martin, George Steinbrenner.
I remember all those. It was crazy.
Really, Billy Martin, George Steinbrenner, and also Billy Martin, Reggie Jackson, right?
Yes, they had their issues as well. I know it wasn't a feud; it was just one thing. But Nolan Ryan and Robin Ventura was always.
Oh, I love that one.
It wasn't a feud, I guess.
Wasn't Nolan like 45?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this guy, young whippersnapper, attacks the old guy that, oh, by the way, in his spare time, he's running cattle all day, and Nolan puts him in a headlock and beats the tar out of him.
By the way, 45 is not that old. Just saying.
No, it's not. It's not.
How about this one? Do you remember Latrell Sprewell
and PJ Carlesimo? I sure do.
Choked him, tried to fight him. That was a...
I can't remember who the other guy was, but I remember there was a coach, Stan Allback, that went after another coach during the game to actually fight during the game.
Right.
I'd have to look that up.
We just had one this year. Juwan Howard.
Yes, we did.
We just had a feud this year.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go.
But again, does that count as a feud? A one-time incident doesn't necessarily mean a feud. To me, a feud goes
ongoing.
over.
Yeah. But for the sake of a 3-hour radio show, we can include those. I got another one for you. I wrote down
Chuck Daly, by the way.
Terrell Owens versus everybody, but more specifically versus Donovan McNabb.
Yeah, that was kind of nasty.
I mean, during the Super Bowl, I think T.O. recently even is still talking about it 20 years later, or almost 20 years later.
I got a recent one.
Yeah.
All right.
Brooks versus Bryson. Golf.
Oh,
over both of your
yes.
heads.
Yeah, that's right.
It got memed. Oh, when you saw the
yeah.
The interview in the background.
Yeah.
Richard made a couple that you liked.
Yes. That I remember it now.
Okay, so I got T.O. versus everybody. LeBron versus Daniel Snyder. yes, it fixed itself, but when LeBron left and they were burning his jerseys and Daniel Snyder was like, we're going to win a championship without LeBron. And they hated him. He left the first time he left, not the second time.
Daniel Snyder's the owner.
Not Daniel Snyder, I'm sorry.
Football.
What's his name? Gilbert. What's the Cleveland owner? Daniel Gilbert?
Daniel Gilbert.
Okay.
What about LeBron and Delonte West?
That one's not PG.
JB, what are some interesting ways that guys spend time in Hoover? I know we've talked about this before off air, but it seems like it's a lot of sitting around and waiting. Are you watching baseball? Or are you doing other things to pass the time? I don't know. Anybody take their golf clubs?
That's funny you asked that, Dalton. Funny story. Myself and Boomer White, we snuck our golf clubs under the bus, and we'd go play some Robert Trent Jones courses during the day when we'd have night games, or even after the game. But for most guys, just kind of hanging out. Some guys like to go to the field and watch other games. Most guys' families are in town, so kind of hang out at the mall or go to restaurants, or different guys have different things they like to do.
So I got this note from Dalton a moment ago. This is for everybody listening. Game 4 between Auburn and Kentucky is currently in a weather delay with first pitch TBD. So I'm just trying to think. I know Hoover is notorious, especially this time of year, for some weather delays. Do you remember any of those?
Not specifically, Nuno. I don't know if we dealt with any weather delays. I think it was the year after I graduated. I think maybe 2017. I remember, I want to say it was LSU, Arkansas, maybe playing into the wee hours of the morning. It's hard to remember back that far, but there's definitely some crazy start times and, just great ball games.
Jibby, you mentioned this current model doesn't seem sustainable for A&M, but yet here they are. So can you put into words the job that Schloss has been able to do with this crew?
It's hard to explain, to be honest with you. I listen to the show daily, and in texting Slosh and talking to him over the phone, getting to know him and hearing him on the show, it's almost like he's waiting for a week where it doesn't work, and it just seems like we just keep extending the week of, hey, we're going to score more runs than the other team, and here we are at the end of the season, and it has worked. One thing I'll say about Slosh, just an amazing job by him and the staff, and every time I'd shoot him a note, congratulations text, he always makes it about the players, which I think speaks a lot about him. And I think, a lot of it does have to do with the players, incredibly proud of them in year one, and just couldn't be more proud of the staff and the players this year for what they've accomplished.
How do you see this A&M Florida matchup? How does A&M match up with the Gators?
Well, I think a lot of it will depend on what kind of start you got on Micah Dallas. Now, I will say that yesterday the Hoover Met ballpark played extremely big. Balls that were hit very well off the bat and had us in the press box going, that might go, weren't doing much of anything, especially after the rain came, and we're expected to get a lot more rain today. So I think the ballpark's going to play big. Florida's got a lot of big swinging mashers in the middle of their order, guys with 20 home runs like Judd Fabian, and then a couple of guys that hit around in BT Ripel, and some of those guys, Wyatt Langford, they're really good hitters. They've got a good power numbers, but when the ballpark's going to play a little bit big, I kind of like the way A&M's plan and approach has been in this ballpark. And Brandon Neely is going to get the start for Florida. Not an overpowering guy by any stretch. It's going to be 89 to 93. Good pitch ability. Going to remind you a little bit of, maybe a Brad Rudis type for Florida. So it'll be interesting. I think A&M, talking to Kendall Rogers last night, maybe has some work to do. You just don't know what the committee is going to value when they sit down and make these host selections. RPI will obviously be part of that formula, but how big of a role will it play? And does A&M need to win a game or two in Hoover to really solidify their candidacy to be a top 8 seed? Me personally, I think that if you win the SEC West and your overall record isn't something crazy bad where you just really kind of sleptwalk through the non-conference, which A&M did to some degree, but not so much where it affected their overall record. But I think the weight of winning the SEC West should carry a lot whenever you go into these postseason discussions because it's the best division in baseball.
Eli Holstein committing to Alabama. I feel from your reports and everybody else's, once that ship sailed, it completely sailed.
Yeah, I think there were some discussions when it initially happened, and to see kind of what was going on, and I think as the time went on, both sides kind of parted ways and moved on to other options. Alabama had always been a school for him ever since when he decommitted. That was immediately a school that was thought to be in the race. He had taken a few visits there even while he was committed. But yeah, so this commitment there to Alabama, not super surprising. And A&M's moved on to other quarterback options. Like I said, Dante Moore, Jaden Rashada, a couple of big time out of state guys that planning on coming in for visits. And then you've got keep an eye on Austin Novosad. So he one of the top quarterbacks in the state and quickly rising as on the national scene as well. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and somebody A&M's been looking at as an option since this thing all kicked off there with Holstein decommitting.
Jason, I almost feel like that was an option, and maybe I'm wrong here, but wasn't Austin like a name that you'd hear a little buzz with even when Eli was still in the fold because of his affiliation to A&M and his desire perhaps?
Well, I think it was more. I think A&M was looking at really sticking with just Holstein, but if they needed another option for whatever reason, whether that's taking a second quarterback or something happened with Eli like it did, then he's a guy they've had their eye on. He's someone that really performed well at camp. And him and his family have ties to Texas A&M. So there's some familiarity there with Austin. So, but he is committed to Baylor, and he has stayed pretty strong with that. I think A&M is probably one of the few schools that might be able to give him a run for their money.
I know it's not your beat, but I'll just ask you, just reading the tea leaves and what you see out there, Arch Manning, does this whole Eli Holstein to Alabama change things for Arch?
Well, I think, Alabama's been in that mix with Georgia and Texas. And so those are kind of been the three main players. And I think this definitely removes the Crimson Tide from that contention. So Eli going there, I would say the chances are probably better for Texas and Georgia right now.
All right, would like for everybody to comment below on what your favorite part of the video was. If it involves Dalton in it, thank you very much for that. He deserves a little props today. Comment, like, subscribe, and again, best sports feuds ever. Rocky Drago, not bad. They killed his best friend, although that didn't really happen. It was a movie. We'll see you next time.